Welcome back, everyone, to our fabulous screencasts. Today, we are going to start fresh with China. We've taken a long break from these, so just bear with me. I'll try and make it as painless as possible. All right, so China and the imperialism and the imperialization of China. Now, first of all, let's talk about China as a country before they're actually imperialized. They are they consider themselves to be a little bit more superior. If you think about, Chinese history and how vast and how great it is, and how the Chinese were very advanced for a long time, much more advanced than other European countries. They still carry this kind of idea that they are superior. They have this cultural superiority. They don't necessarily need to trade with European countries. They look at our product as, just an hour, as in, being a European, as kind of like trinkets, as worthless, as not very good. They don't need them. And they look to themselves as being that sophisticated country that other people should, or other countries should model themselves after. And they develop kind of what's called a closed door policy. And that's not to say that we don't trade. We don't trade at all with China. It just means that we have a limited trade with China. And very lucky for China is that for a long time, they established with the European countries what's called a balance of trade. And the balance of trade is a little bit deceiving, because what it means is that they actually export more than they import. Instead of, you think of balance, you think that it's going to be equal, but it's not. It's when they export more, so they're actually making money. They're making a profit off of the European countries by exporting all of their fabulous goods to Europe, like their tea and their porcelain. Okay, are in high demand in European countries. And in return, I mean, they trade for gold and silver. So they're giving us tea, and they're giving us porcelain, and we're giving them gold and silver. Okay, so they're making a very good profit off of us, which they're totally fine with. Things start to change a little bit. During the 1800s. Number one, well, in the late 1700s, we start trading opium with them. So they've got small areas where Europeans can go and can trade, and opium is, as we know, in India, is a huge seller. Okay, you get that natural resource from India, and then we sell it to China. Okay, so it starts in the late 1700s, and it just grows exponentially throughout the 1800s. And there are a couple problems that China also has to face within the 1800s, and that definitely is modernization. If you think about what's going on in Europe, and especially in Great Britain, you've got all this industry and all this military prowess and all this manufacturing and these goods that are coming out, and how the military is growing, and how we're looking for expansion in markets, and we want to trade with other groups of people. And then the Qing Dynasty in the 1800s. It's Qing, the Qing Dynasty. In the 1800s, they're kind of full of corruption. Okay, there's a lot of corruption going on within the government. There's a lot of corruption within the imperial court. The court is very extravagant, which seems to be the demise of all royal courts at one point or another. Is that money is spending on themselves. And while they're spending it on themselves, their country around them is deteriorating. You've got roads and canals that are just falling apart, and nobody's actually taking care of the country. Okay, so you've got this Qing dynasty that's declining, and you have all this pressure from European countries to trade more with. Not only that, but if you think internally, whenever there are problems with a government, the people have a say. And right now, there's a lot of discontent within China among the people and what to do about their failing Qing dynasty. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the opium that's going on, or that's being imported into China. There is a growing addiction to this. Okay, so the British are selling China the opium. They're becoming addicted, and of course there's a demand for more. So it just keeps growing and growing. And the Chinese government, they see this as a problem, and they try to oops, I misspelled opium down at the bottom. OPIUM, not OPUI. They outlaw in 1836. This this outlawing in 1836 is pretty detrimental. They outlaw, and then they demand Britain to stop bringing it in. And the British refuse, which we'll get to in a second. This is an opium den. So while it is legal, I mean, opium dens are popping up on street corners. Do you know what I mean? On the street, you could just go, you walk down the street and find an opium den and go in and smoke opium. Okay, it was there. It was almost commonplace at that time. And if you think about the exponential growth I talked about, if you look at the late 1700s, you're looking at what? 1,000, or early 1800s, 5,000 chests. It grows, it jumps, within 20, 22 years to 23,500 chests that are coming into China. Okay, so the addiction is definitely there, and it's definitely seeable by the Chinese and by the British. Okay, and so the British, they want this to stop. They outlaw it. They say, Britain, do not send us any more opium. This is going to cause, well, the British refuse. Obviously, they claim, the whole Adam Smith philosophy about free trade, and they're practicing free trade, and they can do what they want, pretty much. So what China does is they start the Opium War. Now, this is kind of, you can kind of guess the outcome. If you think about Britain, you think about China, who doesn't want to industrialize or modernize, and then you've got Britain, who is all about industrialization and modernization. So their ships come in, their steamships come in, they're so powerful, they're so large, they easily take the Chinese ships, and the Chinese, they lose pretty drastically, okay, pretty devastatingly to the British. And because of this, they are forced into a very, very unfair treaty. And in this treaty, has nothing really to do with, well, the only thing that happens to opium is that it's legalized again, and so that continues to be a problem within China. But there's also a few other things that the British force upon the Chinese. Okay, this unequal treaty. They force an indemnity upon China. And indemnity is when the losing side has to pay for the cost of war. So even if it's the British who are losing the money, the Chinese have to pay them back. So this huge indemnity they have to pay. They also lose Hong Kong. Okay, so the island of Hong Kong is now under British control. They have to adopt this term called extraterritoriality, which is a mouthful, but what it means is that the British people who are living in China, they don't have to follow Chinese law. They follow British law, and they're tried by British courts. So things that are illegal within China, it doesn't matter if they're legal in Britain. They can do it, and they won't be tried or arrested in Chinese courts at all. Okay, and then you've got this thing called Most Favored Nation Clause. The British do the same thing to the United States at some point, and that is whenever the Chinese create a treaty or a grant, or they promise something to one nation, Britain automatically gets that no matter what. So if there's any kind of policy or any kind of trade agreement that the Chinese adopt with one country, Britain automatically gets it as well. Okay, it's the Most Favored Nation Clause. And then, of course, they have to open up many, many ports for more trade with Britain or even European countries. Okay? So that's externally what's going on. You've got the problem with opium. You have the Treaty of Nanjing. And now we need to look internally. There are a few things internally that are going on. Now, China knows, or at least many Chinese know that, you know what, things are changing, and we need to change with them. The first problem that the Qing dynasty is going to have is with people who want to overthrow them. Okay, so you have this Qing dynasty, and you have what's called the Taiping Rebellion. Now, the Taiping Rebellion, it sounds kind of odd, but it actually is pretty successful. Okay, it started by this man who is actually a teacher. He takes the civil service exam multiple times, and he fails every time. So his fallback is to become a teacher. So he becomes a teacher. He converts to Christianity, and he thinks that he's seeing visions from God, and God is telling him to create this kingdom of heavenly peace. Okay, his name is Hong Xiuquan. And he is able to actually rally many, many, many people to his cause to overthrow the Qing dynasty. And he wants to modernize a little bit, and he wants to change the government a little bit. Okay, so he looks towards community property. Okay, so shared land among people, gender equality between among males and females. You know, the whole idea of foot binding, which I think you guys learned about in the middle school. He wants to get rid of that. He wants women to be able to take civil service exams. He wants to replace the Confucian classics, those Confucian texts, with the Bible, with the Christian Bible. He wants to end some traditions like the Kuei. And if you look over here, where's my picture? A Kuei is that, here we go, is this long braid that's very traditional. He wants to end that, chop them off. And then he wants to enforce laws by military rule to make sure that everyone is following them very closely. Okay? So all of these things are what other people support, and because of this, he's able to actually make some drastic or have drastic effects within China. He's not able to topple the Qing dynasty completely, but what he is able to do is force the Qing dynasty to kind of make concessions. So now the Qing dynasty, they have to work with local rulers and with people who are ruling over certain territories. Okay, and then in their territories they can rebuild and they can develop kind of a base for themselves, and become strong. 20 to 30 million deaths, which in this last maybe 14 years, 14, 15 years. So 20 million to 30 million deaths because of this. The Yangtze, I should say the lower Yangtze basin is destroyed, okay? So that's the Yellow River. And trading ports and communities built along that are just completely devastated, okay? So all these things are effects of the rebellion, and really all it did oh my gosh, it's been a while, is that it weakens the Qing dynasty pretty drastically. So not only does the Qing dynasty have that problem, but they also have a couple people who are looking to modernize. It's what they want to do, and they realize that it's very, very important. This one woman is standing in their way, Empress Cixi. She is a conservative. She wants to hold on to Confucian ways. She wants to reestablish the dedication of Confucian ways across China. She surrounds herself with Confucian theorists in order to maintain this traditional outlook for China. And she's not going to, and she's going to do it pretty drastic. She's going to do it very, what's the word I'm looking for? Vehemently, I guess maybe. She's going to enforce her policies pretty harshly among the people because she does not want to modernize. She wants to keep traditional China. Okay? Her one problem, again, this is internal, her one problem, it doesn't necessarily focus with the British, just like the Taiping Rebellion, is it's called the self-strengthening movement. Now, these are just reformers. Reformers realize they need to make a change. They need to modernize with the rest of the world, or else they are most definitely going to fall behind. Opium War is a perfect example of that. So what they do is they start to modernize. They start building weapons. This is an arsenal that they build, okay, to create weapons. They start building shipyards. They have railroads. They have telegraph lines. They open up industries for people. They really try to modernize China for the better of China, externally and internally, if you think about it. The infrastructure of China and also the defense of China is what they're looking for. But because they don't necessarily have the support of this lady, they have no support from their government, it's not really going to be very successful. So they make all these reforms and they're kind of for naught because you don't get the backing of your government, and you definitely have got to deal with outside problems, okay? People who are looking to China to take control. Okay, they see Britain doing it and they want some. And one of those countries is Japan. Japan starts a war with China. Okay, it doesn't last very long because Japan is very quick to modernize. They adopt Western ways very quickly, and they're able to change. They're able to advance their infrastructure and advance their military, and they very easily come into China and defeat China's military. And what China loses is they lose Korea. They actually lose Taiwan. They lose a couple other places, smaller places, but it's devastating for China. And what's very interesting, and I wish I had the picture, I'll find it for you and I'll show you tomorrow, is that when they go to meet at the peace conference, you've got Japan and all this modern dress and all this modern these military uniforms that look very European, and China is dressed in their traditional robes. Okay, and it shows a very good juxtaposition between the East and the West at this time. Okay, and we'll look at it tomorrow. But because of this, because of Japanese defeat, if you look at the coast of China, other countries are going to swoop right in and they're going to start taking control. So this is where we have the severe imperialism that occurs within China. It's all spheres of influence. Hopefully you remember what sphere of influence is, what kind of imperialism that is, and that's when people start taking over. You see up in the north, there's Russia, there's Japan. You've got Germany, who has a sphere of influence. British has a huge sphere of influence. Japan again, and then the French down in the south. All of these areas are being controlled economically by European countries. Okay, and if you remember, we looked at this image and about what's going on. China's being completely carved up into spheres of influence because of this. We are going to stop there with the 100 Days Reform, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll review a little bit about what's going on in China, because I'm running out of time, unfortunately. So you all have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow, okay? Bye.